So maybe you're curious about this Mike Bloomberg guy. Maybe you saw him on the debate stage. Maybe you've seen one of his ads where he's eating ice cream or his face is photoshopped onto a meatball or something like that. It's funny, but let's be honest with each other. It doesn't really tell you much about who he is, what he believes, what he wants to do. And so I wanna help out. In case you are curious about Mike Bloomberg, here are 10 things you should probably know about him. So he had this to say back in 1999 in an off-the-record conversation. My daughter is tall and busty and blonde. We went to China together, and what's a 16-year-old going to do on a business trip? He pops another carefully buttered piece of bread in his mouth. So I got her dates in every city in China. Then he yelled at the guy who was listening, that's off the record. That's a very weird thing to say about your daughter. Not unprecedented, to be fair. Donald Trump does talk about his daughter in that very same way, about how she's tall and busty and blonde, and how you gotta hook her up with people as you travel around the country. There are other things you could do, presumably, on a business trip in China. You know, you could see the cultural sites, take in the culture, all of that. He had a different approach to it, so that's sort of weird. Here's another. So let's talk a little bit about his relationship with Donald Trump, because obviously they're New York billionaires. They've probably come across each other, and right now he's presenting himself as the guy who can take out Donald Trump. But what does he really think about Donald Trump? Take a look at this.
I know Donald Trump, he's a great guy. He doesn't do everything he says, but he sure tries, and I'm a big fan of Donald Trump.
He's a big fan of Donald Trump. Is he the guy to get it done and taking out Trump, but he's a big fan of him? And look, here's the thing. He says he's a big fan, but he wasn't president then, right? I mean, we didn't know as much about Trump. Can't he be friends with Donald Trump? I want you to bear in mind what had already happened when that video happened. We had already been through the whole birther thing. Donald Trump had already been the public face of trying to take down Barack Obama by spreading a racist conspiracy theory about where he was born. And after all of that, after everybody knew who Donald Trump was, Mike Bloomberg is a big fan of him. That's an interesting thing to note. Let's talk about something else involving Barack Obama. What does Bloomberg think about Obama's effect on the country when he was president?
We have a big problem in the world. I would argue that today we are more segregated in America, certainly, than we were in terms of race, than we were a dozen years ago. And yet we're just finishing up 8 years with our first black president. Why are we more separated than we were before? That is the question you've got to ask yourself. Why during the Obama administration didn't we pull together? Well, I asked the president, that's his job really, to pull people together.
Okay, now if you're new to Bloomberg, I want you to really think about what that video means, especially mashed up with the last one we showed you, because you might be seeing these ads that are all over the place. They were running during the debate, maybe you saw them then, of Bloomberg just filling his ads with Barack Obama saying a nice thing about him. And they're together and there's a bunch of pictures about them, and he wants you to believe that Bloomberg and Obama, they go together like peanut butter and jelly. He's a big fan of him. I mean, note that in 2008 when Barack Obama was running for president, Bloomberg refused to endorse him. So just think about that for a second. But he just said in that video that the racial strife we experienced, the racist campaign against Barack Obama, that's Obama's fault. Not the Tea Party or Donald Trump, who was literally doing the whole birther thing during that time. It's all on Obama. That's why we had more racism. So if there was an explosion of right-wing hate groups, if there were white supremacist groups popping up, that's Obama's fault. That's what Bloomberg said. So just bear that in mind too. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different issues. So one is privacy. Everybody's concerned in this digital age about people snooping on them, finding out too much about them. What does he think about, for instance, the NSA possibly violating your privacy rights?
One thing that, look, if you don't want it to be in the public domain, don't take that picture, don't write it down. In this day and age, you gotta be pretty naive to believe that the NSA isn't listening to everything and reading every email. And incidentally, given how dangerous the world is, we should hope they are, because this is really serious what's going on in the world.
So that's Mike Bloomberg on the NSA. A couple different problems there that we should probably acknowledge. One is that he thinks that the government should be reading everything that you put out there. Reading all of your emails, it's not too much of a leap to imagine he wants them listening to your phone calls too. I mean, after all, it's a dangerous world. Your privacy rights, what are those really worth when there are dangerous people out there? Is that what you think? Is that what you believe about the world? Does Bloomberg match up with you there? That the government knows better, they should read everything you put out there, they should look at all of your photos? because there's dangerous people. What a weirdly authoritarian way to approach the government. And if he was in charge of the NSA, what lines would he draw? What lines would he erase? It's a dangerous world after all, privacy. Really, who has time for that? But note that in the beginning, when he talked about, if you don't want it put out there, don't take that picture, that's not really about the NSA. That's some sort of weird shaming of people whose nude photos are leaked. What a weird thing to say, what an out of touch thing to say. And yet he says it quite openly. He's not ashamed to talk about these sorts of issues. Let's talk about another issue that he was wildly wrong on, and this is the trans community. So he said this: if your conversation during a presidential election is about some guy wearing a dress and whether he, she, or it can go to the locker room with their daughter, that's not a winning formula for most people. I would argue that that sort of position in 2020 is not a winning formula. To call trans individuals, trans women specifically in this case, men in dresses, or he, she, or it. Now look, in Bloomberg's defense, there are people who use this sort of language. Rush Limbaugh talks in this way, Ben Shapiro talks in this way. Not a lot of Democrats really, certainly not someone who wants to be the leader of the Democratic Party, talks about that community in this way, especially as they're being targeted on a daily basis by people who want to commit violence upon them, the government infringing on their rights. Is he gonna be their champion when he considers them men in dresses, when he considers them its? I kind of doubt it, but it's important that you know. So let's talk about the economy. What does he think about wages? After all, this is like gonna be another populist election. You got Donald Trump who's gonna pretend to be a populist. People are really worried about the way the economy is going. He's worried too, but not necessarily the way you'd think. He said this, and understand this is in response to New York City when he was mayor, potentially passing a living wage bill, so that some workers who worked for companies that were being given government money would earn $10 or $11 an hour. And he said, it's interesting if you think about it. The last time we've really had a big managed economy was the USSR, and that didn't work out so well. It would be great if all jobs in the city paid a lot of money and had great benefits for the workers, not good for the employers. But if you force that, you will just drive businesses out of the city. So again, in response to a few workers getting $10 or $11 in New York City, which I would argue is not a living wage, he said that's like Soviet Russia. And it's gonna drive all the businesses out of New York City. So as president, is he gonna be supportive of raising wages? I mean, not only did he speak out against that bill, but you know what happened when they passed it? He vetoed it. And then thankfully they passed it over his veto, which is great. So he sued the city to block it. And when that didn't work, he sued the city a second time to overturn it. Like, I like politicians who are passionate about the issues they care about. But that passion being funneled into trying to make sure that workers can't earn enough to actually live in the city they want to live in, that's a weird way to expend your energy. And bear in mind, that's on a living wage. What about just a minimum wage? I mean, that's easy, right? Everybody supports raising the minimum wage. No, he doesn't support raising the minimum wage. He says, I've never supported raising the minimum wage. I mean, that's what we expect out of Donald Trump. Come on, he's literally said the same thing. Imagine how much glee Donald Trump is gonna have on the debate stage, pointing out that the Democratic nominee thinks that people on minimum wage are probably having it a bit too easy. Really, they think they should earn more money? That's him. I mean, really, if you want to talk about who Mike Bloomberg is, we've got to talk about sexism and sexual harassment, because he has a record that could match anyone, including Donald Trump. Let's talk about a few of the things he's said. And bear in mind, this is just a sort of like Whitman sampler. There's a lot more where this came from. In 1989, in response to one of his male employees who was gonna get married, he told the female employees, all of you girls line up to give him oral sex as a wedding present. Now, was he joking? Sure, he'd say he was joking. Do you think it's funny? You think that's how he should treat his female employees? Imagine if I told female employees here, what would you think of me if I said that? But Bloomberg was very happy to make comments like that. Let's go through a few others. If women wanted to be appreciated for their brains, they'd go to the library instead of to Bloomingdale's. You know, because women are always shopping instead of studying. Men don't shop, they don't buy things. They go to the library. That's what he thinks about women. I know for a fact that any self-respecting woman who walks past a construction site and doesn't get a whistle will turn around and walk past again and again until she gets one. Because women not only don't mind being, catcalled at, they're desperate for it. They will like stop their day in its tracks and just go around and around this construction site until they get catcalled. That's Mike Bloomberg. He said of a female employee, I'd like to do that piece of meat. That was a woman whose career he had power over. He wants to do her and she's a piece of meat. He asked a woman employee after he was unhappy with the way a meeting had gone, quote, "If the clients told you to lay down and strip naked so they could F you, would you do that too?" Now he said on the debate stage last night, like, women love working here. Yeah, I'm sure some women are perfectly happy, maybe the ones he hasn't talked to in that particular way. And understand, this is just the bare, like a little bit of Bloomberg on women. Telling a woman who got pregnant when she was working for him to kill it, counting all the women who got pregnant because it was so inconvenient for him. Not to mention the many NDAs and sexual harassment suits that he is currently facing. So feel free to do a little bit more research on that. You're not gonna like what you end up finding. Okay, so let's go back to policy a little bit. A lot of people really are really favorable towards Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, some of those popular things that the American government has ever done. What does he think about these programs? What would he do as president?
Now let's talk about intelligent cuts rather than this sequestering thing which would devastate defense. There is a ways to slowly decrease the benefits or raise the eligibility age for Medicare and for Social Security. There's a ways to have more copay on Medicaid, which will do two things. One, the users of the service will pay a little more, but two, they'll think twice before they use services. So the services they use will be those that are really needed and not stuff that would be nice to have.
I want to ask you a serious question. Are you so well off that it doesn't make you nauseous the way it does for me to watch a guy worth $60 billion tell you that your wages shouldn't go up, and in fact, the programs that you're gonna rely on later in life, those are probably due for some cuts. Taxes should definitely go down for billionaires, and that's gonna cost some money. How do we make it up? We cut Social Security, we cut Medicare, we cut Medicaid. We raised the age for you to qualify for it. Now that was a few years ago. He's gonna tell you that he believes different, but he was already a powerful politician who had a control over many people's lives in New York City. That's what he wanted. He wanted those programs to be cut. Okay, we've already heard that Trump might do that. It makes us sick to think that Trump might do that. It should make us equally sick to think that the Democratic nominee would also be pushing for cuts to those programs that so many people depend on. I want to talk briefly though about foreign policy. What does he think is acceptable in foreign policy? So he was asked a question, this is a few years ago, when Israel had blown up some hospitals and schools in Palestine. Here's what he thought about that.
Unfortunately, if Hamas hides among the innocent are going to get killed because Israel just does not have any choice but to stop people Hamas firing rockets at their citizens. They have a right to defend themselves, and America would do exactly the same thing.
Doesn't the Geneva Conventions lay out that you cannot attack schools or hospitals?
Nobody's attacking schools or hospitals. We're attacking Hamas. But Hamas is standing in the middle of a hospital. If they're standing in the middle of a hospital and they're firing rockets at your kids, what would you expect us to do? Would you really want us to not try to stop them? And unfortunately, if there are innocents getting killed at the same time, it's not Israel's fault.
It's not their fault. You blow up a hospital, you blow up a school. This whole international law thing, so inconvenient. I mean, we could go in person, try to take them out without killing a whole bunch of civilians, children, people who are sick in the hospitals. We could change our policy, instead of just continuing decades of this policy of, we lose a person, so we kill 100 of theirs, and maybe we just ride that out for the rest of our lives. If he becomes president, he is just going to stand on the sidelines and allow that cycle of violence to continue, while saying that it's okay for countries to violate human rights laws, to violate international laws involving war. He thinks that that's perfectly fine. And in fact, what could they possibly do otherwise? They're not responsible for that. He doesn't even truly acknowledge that these civilians are being killed. He says, they're just wrong place, wrong time. They're not victims in that case, not at all. They're just collateral damage. What are you gonna do? Now think about how he would approach other conflicts around the world. So Yemen is being devastated by Saudi Arabia. What if he has business with Saudi Arabia? You think he's really gonna care about the people in Yemen any more than he does the people in Palestine? Do we wanna take that gamble? Do we wanna do that? I don't think so. But I wanna turn to one more thing, and this is, to me, this is possibly the worst thing about him, and it is his expansion of stop and frisk, his defense of it, even years after it had been ruled unconstitutional. When he was asked about the fact that almost only the people who were being stopped were black and brown, generally males between 18 and 25, he was upset about those numbers, but not in the way you might expect. Take a look.
I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little. Well, it's exactly the reverse of what they say. They are. I don't know where they went to school, but they certainly didn't take a math course. Well, exactly so. Or a logic course.
So he says now on the debate stage, so we saw that things were going out of control with stop and frisk, that the wrong people were being stopped. It was incredibly racist. And so I shut it down. Okay, did he? I mean, he's the one saying, if you think that we were being discriminatory towards black and brown individuals, you don't know math, you don't know logic. You're too stupid to understand what I'm trying to do with stop and frisk. And finally it was stopped. And for years afterward, he still talked fondly about the program. He is lying to you knowingly about the racist policy that he expanded massively during his time as mayor of New York. And he thinks that you won't ever learn the truth, that you'll just watch his little ads and you'll think that he can get it done. Okay, I'm hoping that people learn who he truly is. I'm trying to do my part and understand that this is just the beginning. I mean, we could talk about his spying on Muslim students in New York City, his comments about how we should effectively have death panels. If you get old and you get prostate cancer, we're not gonna do anything for you. It's a waste of money. He said that, it's on tape. He thinks that kids only support democratic socialism because they think it has to do with MySpace or something. So insulting to young voters, that's gonna help in a general election. He thinks that farmers are stupid in comparison to tech workers. They don't have enough gray matter to do more complicated work. Paid sick leave, he thinks that's a stupid policy that shouldn't exist. He's been quoted saying that. I mean, telling a female employee to kill her baby because it's inconvenient to him. This is who he is, okay? You can watch his ads, you can see him scoop ice cream. It seems fun and happy. No, he's not that guy. That is just a $1 billion campaign to sell you rotten fruit effectively. But people are gonna learn who he is. The question is, will they learn during the primary when there's still time, or will we wait until we've chosen as a nominee and America discovers who he really is and he gets destroyed by Donald Trump in the general election, okay? I guess we'll see. Thanks for watching The Damage Report. What if you could protect yourself on the internet for the price of a cup of coffee a month? Well, if you head to nordvpn.com/TYT, you'll be able to connect up to 6 devices to NordVPN's military grade encryption for $349 a month. If you go now, they'll even throw in a month for free. Go now.